I grew up in Baltimore, but I've been in Maine for about 10 years now. But I grew up in Baltimore, and in high school started going to a high school for the arts down there, which is where I first started really seriously studying painting. And then I spent 2 years at Rhode Island School of Design before transferring to Cooper Union in New York, studying fine art painting the whole time. And after about a year of living in New York and doing a lot of odd jobs and just anything I could to scrape by a living, I started selling a couple paintings here and there, and I had enough money to not have to work all the journey and just paint, hang out, and work on improving my paintings. And the next summer, I managed to sell enough paintings again that I didn't have to work the next winter. And I managed to keep pulling this off, and I'm still sort of following the same plan. It's getting a little more reliable, which is nice. So for this show, I generally do a lot of landscape painting, a lot of plein air landscape painting. And Karen and I talked about some ideas for a theme for the show, and I wanted to do a show that was sort of more about this area and getting to know this area. As long as I've lived in Maine, I've been in the Camden sort of area, so I've found a lot of places to paint around there, and I'm very comfortable with painting that environment. But I wanted to sort of get to know down East Maine a little better through looking for painting locations and painting on site. Every painting here, even the large ones, was started on location. The large ones then I work on more in the studio, but I would try and get an overall feel for the scene and some more specific information on location. So one of the things that's kind of fun about being a plein air painter and standing out in the open air painting is that I drive around and walk around until something jumps out at me and sort of asks to be painted, something about the light or the colors on an object or the way shapes interact, or something visual that will grab my attention, make me want to paint it. And once I've got that sort of draw to a scene, I stand there and will stand with my easel for anywhere from 3 hours to a whole day, just working away at a painting and really just being a part of the landscape a little bit and watching things happen around me, getting to know the people who go by. Once you sort of stop the car and settle down and set the easel up, it's a very quiet practice, and you just become a part of this landscape and get to learn a lot about the world around you, and the birds start coming out a little more and things just start happening. It's a really fun way to not only study the visual parts of the environment I'm painting, but also just kind of get to know the location and get to know the feel of the place. So there's when I'm driving around looking for something to paint, generally sometimes there's an idea about the object that interests me, but more often it is a very visual, formal thing. The thing that I really like to paint the most is light on an object, so things like these birch trees where there's a lot of really strong backlighting. I just really love trying to catch this sort of elusive quality of light, where it's full of color, but it's the kind of thing like that in a photograph. The lights and darks get exaggerated and it gets flattened out a lot, but in a painting I can try and catch all the color. The shadows are full of color. Like if you look at the shadow of a tree in really strong daylight, you'd think, oh, it's just going to be dark green. When you start really looking at it, there's a lot of really beautiful small moments of color that go on within that, and also within the sunlight. And that's one of the things you notice when you're standing outside painting on location, is just this really rich complexity of color. So that kind of thing, whether it's, this is a very different, more muted kind of color, but it's the same kind of thing where that soft light and the very simple there's a very simple sort of composition of this, where it's basically a light section of sky and water and a darker gray section of the rocks, and they have a very strong sort of formal, it's sort of like a very formal, simple composition of just dark and light shapes, one dark and one light interacting. But there's a lot of subtlety within that. So I like to try and have that sense, like I've learned a lot of this from looking at Andrew Wyeth paintings, that he'll have all these beautiful small moments, but within the overall the image there's a very structured kind of composition to that. So that's one of the things I've been playing around with, is trying to find the simplicity of the scene in terms of big shapes. Like this has really a dark sort of reverse L, and this light that sort of sinks back in the distance. But even though it is a simple shape, there's a lot of like, this happened to be in Blue Hill, but what actually did interest me about it was there is, within that shadow, which is a fairly bluish shadow, there's really like greenish blues, purple blues, more rich blues, very grayed down. There's a lot, just a huge range of colors within that. And that kind of thing is not only really fun to see, but it's really hard to mix those colors and really find my way around that kind of thing. One of the things that's kind of more of a challenge with plein air painting up here is in Camden and Rockland, I've been painting there for years, so I know where some simple places are. Up here, I would go to Acadia and just park the car and walk around for a while until I found something. And I wouldn't really think, oh, I'm gonna have to carry my easel down there to paint it. So, like that scene and that scene, both of them I had to park the car and hike my stuff down into the rocks. This one wasn't so bad. This one, I had to get down like these, it was probably 30 feet of rock, cliff kind of things, and find a little like, it was like a little goat path or something I could walk down while carrying a backpack full of my gear, and of course I had like a cooler, little like soft cooler with my lunch, and my easel, my palette, and like bungee cords, all this mess, just walking along, just trying to figure out how to get that stuff down into the location that I liked.
Then back up.
And back up with a wet painting. Yeah, that was 2 trips actually. I tried to really pare it down so I can have just a nice simple setup, and I can do that with the smaller ones very easily, but with the bigger canvases I need to have a slightly bigger easel, and I need to be able to really sort of settle in the location, which because I didn't know the area quite as well, I just wanted to explore and find stuff that was really kind of, like, I love Acadia, it's beautiful, but I wanted to find views of Acadia that weren't what I think of when I think Acadia. It's like, this painting reminds me a little more of the Southwest, and this, like, outside of the water, my wife and I went to the Southwest this past spring, and it's just these funny, like, kind of orange rock formations and things like that. And I got down in there, and these big monolithic rocks are just standing right in front of me. It was very dramatic, and then there was a little bit of ocean cutting in the background. And it was just such a weird kind of spot that when I tell people it's in Acadia, they're always surprised. It doesn't feel like what you expect. And this one, the hike wasn't quite as bad getting in there, but it was a really fun kind of, it feels to me like it's just sucking you out to sea. It sucks you back into the water because there's all the lines to pull you back into that water. And I like to think about how the eye is going to draw the viewer around the scene. So the part of my sort of overall idea about a show like this, where I'm trying to figure out what's going to tie it all together and what's going to tie these landscapes are this area, sort of like down East Maine, anywhere from, mostly from around here or Southwest Harbor, went down to Blue Hill and Stonington, over to the Scoota Peninsula, and down to, went to Korea at one point. That was probably as far east as I got. So anywhere in that range, which is a big piece of landscape. It was a lot of area to cover. But trying to figure out what was going to sort of be the tie into all that. For me, when I go out and find these things I want to paint, there's sort of I want to find something that is personally attractive to me. I don't want to just think about, I can't go out of the house and think, I want to paint birch trees, or I want to go drive up to whatever, Stonington, and find the perfect lobster boat painting. I just want to go to a place, I just pick a spot, like I'm going to drive towards Stonington, and if I find something that pulls me off the side, like the Hancock Grocery, I was just driving along and I saw that, and I just couldn't believe how cool that building was. And with the sign, I just thought it was a perfect little painting. So it's just driving along until something jumps out and grabs my attention, and there's some kind of personal connection with it. Even though I do landscape paintings, I like the idea that a painting can still be some kind of a self-portrait, and that there's something about me in it. There's some connection to my personal interest, personal involvement with the scene that that drives my desire to paint it. So it's sort of a weird idea, even though they're all just landscapes and they're not even like that like they're not places I know really personally well. I feel like the time I spend working on the painting and getting to know it, settling in, I'm sort of getting a little bit of myself into each one of these paintings. And the sort of the quiet study of a place is, I feel like that's something that it's been something I've really enjoyed, and especially in the last year or two, is just really settling into the location a little more. One of my favorite quotes about painting is from Andrew Wyeth, who said that your art can only go as deep and as far as your love goes, and I think that's a really sort of a nice way to think about the more sort of emotional attachment to a painting, and I try to really get as much of that as I can into these landscapes. So, does anyone, yeah?
Just based on your comment there from Wyatt, do you ever get to a point in a piece where you don't love it anymore and that's when you stop? I mean, I can't believe that you finished every single thing you ever started. I mean,
No,
I don't know.
yeah,
I never wasn't thinking of that until you said that. And
Yeah.
I thought, gee, maybe you get to a point and go, eh.
Well, there are definitely paintings that I lose it. I just completely lose. I don't quite know what it is. If I knew what it was, I'd be able to control it better, and I'd be able to make all good paintings. But there's a certain point where you just things start falling apart, and like there are times where something goes wrong and you can fix it and stick with it. And I really like there's a great analogy I had from a teacher in college that when I was struggling with the painting, I've been working on it for most of probably 2 months. I just plugging away. And when I said that I just hated the whole thing, it's like, well, it's not really that bad. You've been looking at it too long. But a painting is like a child. You're going to have a really cute painting in the beginning. It's going to be fun and adorable. And then it's going to get really annoying for a couple of years. And it's going to just say no and fight back. And it's going to be really interesting. You get to know it as it matures. So it's like about 10 or 11. And then it's just a teenager. And you don't want to deal with it. It's a complete pain in the ass. It keeps fighting you back. And then all of a sudden, you've got this like 20-year-old, interesting adult you can have a relationship with. And like your painting needs to go through all these stages of like, it's really all in my own head, but you have to have that sort of, you have to struggle through some sort of shift through all that. There are times when I definitely just have to quit because I know the painting is a lost cause. But I try to really keep in mind that a lot of times the best work comes from sticking it out, and you love your kids even though they're a pain in the ass. So I do try and ride it out. But I feel like that quote isn't even so much about relationship with a specific painting as much as you can sort of love the world around you as much as you can love your painting. So I feel like it's not even specific to the painting. Like your art goes as deep as your love goes. It's more just if you can be a really sensitive and caring and involved person, then you're more likely to be able to make sensitive and caring and involved paintings. So I try to be aware of that just in daily life, so that when I come to my paintings, I can bring a really good attitude towards that. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your process for your painting? Like you write thumbnails or do you draw before you start?
Generally, so actually on the other side of my notes, these are thumbnails for paintings that I did. Like when I do a thumbnail kind of thing, it's really just a really quick sketch of where major shapes are going to be. Like something like this, it's just really where do I want it. You have to decide where you're going to crop everything, what's worth including. So I try to, the first thing I do when I see a scene, something jumps out and makes me stop and want to paint it. But if it's a ketchup bottle, something grabs me about it, then I have to think, well, is it the ketchup bottle in relationship to the 20 other things on the counter, or is it just the ketchup bottle in relationship to 2 things around it, or is it just two pieces, like two color relationships of the sign and the, so whatever it is, I want to just make sure I'm just painting that. So like this, the whole sky was not that interesting to me. It was the relationships of just a little bit of sky and water and all the grays around it. So the first thing I do is try and really figure out what is most important to get across and how do I want to compose and sort of block things in. And as soon as I've got that figured out, I'll do sometimes a couple sketches in here, or sometimes I'll do them right on the canvas for the smaller ones, and just try and figure out like where shapes are going to be. But even something as involved as this, I would start with just, I'll do a quick line drawing just in paint with a smallish brush of just like where the hard edges are going to be, like where the big shapes of light and dark are going to be, and not worrying about, I'm not going to just draw like totally model in the gas pump and all the small moments. I just want to see the biggest shapes of color. Like, and even this, there's a lot of busy information going on. There's windows in there. Most of that is afterthoughts. Once I've got the big, where the light and dark shapes are going to be, or if it's more of a color intensity thing, because like a red truck in a green field, it'd be where the big red and green shapes, wherever the biggest chunks of information are going to be, I just try to get that organized. And I really try and cover the canvas quickly. Like if, with the big ones it takes longer, but something these sizes, I'll get an approximation of what each color is going to be in the first half hour, and try and get the whole canvas covered with some information in the first half hour. So that, you know, if you're just trying to mix this color, and you just put that color down on the white canvas, it's just, there's no context to help you figure out if it needs to be lighter in comparison to the sky, or darker in comparison to the dark windows in there. So I really want to get like an overall context of color information down, and then from that, once I've got, that's really the hardest part when I'm concentrating the most, is the first half hour, the hour or two, whatever. If you're a bigger one, it takes a lot longer, but trying to get that context and relationships down the canvas is tough. And then after that, it's fun. That's when I get to play around and just, well, if I exaggerate the cools and I exaggerate the warms, will give it a slightly stronger sense of sort of strong daylight on it, and what are the things I can play, where can I lie a little to push the colors, where do I need to be exactly right, where should the drawing need to just be moved around. It's really just playing with paint at that point. And then after a while, I have to try and, okay, now what do I need to do to finish this? Because at a certain point, you have to really start locking down things. But so I try to really think big, like pick my moment, really focus on what it is that matters to me, make that what the painting's about, and then just go really big blocks of color, big pieces of information. You know, when we're drawing and painting things, the edges, you know, you look at the edges and you know what the object is. Like, you know if you're painting a face, it's a face. And you know that you're painting two eyes and a nose and a mouth. But if you can stop thinking of what it is, it's all just pieces of color. And the more simplicity you can approach a scene with, and the less you can think about how complicated a face is, and you know the nostrils go far deep in, and the teeth, like there's all this information you can get wrapped up in. But if you just look at somebody, they're just pieces of color. All your eye is doing is taking all this information and translating it into, you know, your eye is figuring it all out. So as a painter, I have to trust that someone else's eye is going to be able to do that. Like, I'm just basically pixelating the scene into pieces of color and trying to find interesting things to play around with within that. Do you have more, like, is that enough, or do you?
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
When do you decide on the size of the painting, and how do you go about stretching the canvas? Like, got all different shapes here.
Well, I do, I generally have a bunch of different canvases in my car when I go out to paint. I'll try to have one or two big-ish canvases in the back seat, and then stacks of different sizes throughout. And certain scenes just, I feel like they seem more dramatic and more imposing, and they want to be a little bit bigger. And other scenes feel more intimate, or more like it'd be just a fun sketch to sort of play around with. You know, on a smaller scale, I can play around with shapes a little bit more. It's easier to fix something if I screw it up. If I screw up a huge piece of color on here, it's going to be a big deal trying to get back into it. So if it's something I just want to play around with a new idea, I usually start small. But with the bigger ones, it's something about it just, I'll just be able to picture it in my head as a really big canvas. And I generally do stretch all my own canvases and gesso them and all that. So I just have a ton of canvas. Like in the spring, I have a pile of them, and I just make sure my car has a variety. I try to make sure my car has a variety of canvases, plenty of paint, plenty of turpentine. But there are plenty of times you drive somewhere and you realize you're out of white paint, and there's nowhere you can go from there except the art store.
What do you paint in the winter?
I actually go outside still in the winter. It's not so bad as long as it's not windy. It's fine. Like I painted this past winter. I did a lot of winter painting. I did a couple of night scenes on full moon nights, which is great in the winter with snow on the ground and a full moon. There's tons of light. I have a little book light that I use at night, and the book light was almost not necessary when I was painting on a full moon with a bunch of snow on the ground. But I did one painting in Camden Harbor. It was about 8 degrees out that night, and I was more comfortable than I'd been like 2 days beforehand when it was 35 degrees with wind blowing. Because as long as it's calm, nothing's cutting through your clothes, so you can stay out there for an hour or two, and then you need to get inside really fast. But I also do a lot of, I've been playing around with some larger canvases. I used to do, the plein air work tends to go really fast on site, and then I bring them inside. And like this, I repainted several sections of this, and then in the studio I can just sort of let something sit on the wall and look at it and try and decide, well, what do I think needs to be adjusted to make it just right? So I've been playing around some bigger canvases. I've got a 6 by 5 foot one that's huge, and it's a landscape that's very close to my home. It's like the most beautiful, perfect scene, and I keep trying to make this painting a perfect painting. So I just plug away on that for a couple hours with the cats in the studio in the winter. It's very cozy and warm, and then I go back outside. But it's a little bit of, I still like being outside, and it makes me paint fast and fresh. There's a huge value in painting outside, and with the lights changing, the boat you're painting is going to drive away, the truck, like this truck here, he wasn't there when I started. He pulled in, and I saw someone get out, and the driver stayed in the car, and I thought, oh Christ, I really want to paint this truck, and I know he's not going to be there long. So I tried to just paint the biggest, like the same way I was talking about earlier, just get the biggest pieces of information out as fast as I could, and then take mental notes of where do the colors get a little warmer as they get lower, where are the darks most intense, where's the bright reds, just get a bunch of that information. But painting something like that where I know it's just a fleeting moment that I've got to capture. You're forced to find a more gestural way of approaching painting. I feel like it's helped me find a natural way to handle paint, and really just look for what's most important to me about the scene and not get wrapped up. If I was doing this from a photo, I'd have probably been lettering in forward on the back and putting every little dent and ding and little cross hatches. And I don't really care about that stuff, and it starts feeling like work when I do that. So painting outside lets me stay in touch with that, like immediacy.
But when you're painting a big painting, it's huge big painting, you use photographs of art.
No, I've been using paintings. I think I've got one this size and then two that size that I've done. I live right near the Snow Bowl in Camden, the Ragged Mountain, and there's a pond. So like when you drive home in the evening, there's one spot that's sort of some guy who I don't know's yard, where you look across his yard, across the pond with the sun going down behind it. There's backlighting on the water, there's glare popping off the water, and the mountain's beautiful, and all these soft purples and greens. So I've gone out there to this sort of spot on the side of the road where you can see that. I've done a couple little sketches. And I've found that it's a lot less important to have a photograph than it is to have a sketch or a study done on site. Because on site I can get the colors how I would paint them. Like I can paint from what I'm seeing and capture like the sort of whatever little decisions I make to sort of capture that sense of light. I don't know exactly what they are, but if I have a photograph in the studio, I can't get that in color. I can't punch the color up to how I see things when I'm painting on site. So there's tons of detail in the photo, but it's not as valuable to me. I'm also a really bad photographer, so I can't really get, my wife keeps telling me there's a way to get better color in scenes, and I need her to give me a lesson. So, yeah.
Do you like people watching you paint? Do you mind people watching you paint?
I don't really.
Do they ever say, well, what about this?
Oh yeah, you wouldn't believe the things people say to you. It's pretty amusing. So when I was in college, I was doing more abstract kind of things and interiors, all kinds of different scenes and some landscapes. And when I got out of college, I started painting outside. I didn't know there was a whole, I knew the history of plein air painting, but I didn't realize there was a whole culture of it today. That there are a lot of people that sort of, like, there's even a magazine for plein air painters, which is surprising to me that I didn't know about all that. So I just started painting outside because I liked it. And I would always find a spot tucked into the corner of a field with my back to a tree where no one could get behind me, and I could just paint and no one was going to talk to me. And then I started slowly getting more confidence in my ability to paint outside, and I also got more comfortable. People come look anyway. No matter where you're tucked into, if you're outside with a canvas, people are going to come watch you paint. So I started getting used to people, talking to people, and then I got to the point where I was fine being around Maine and in Camden, and I went and did a show in Philadelphia at a gallery I was with down there for a while. And I was painting on the streets of Philadelphia, and there's hundreds of people walk by just while you're doing one painting. And it's funny, down there people care less than they do in Maine. In Maine, everyone's on vacation, so they have nothing but time to come and see what I'm up to. And in Philadelphia, people thought I was kind of like the weirdo, and they were like, oh, he's kind of odd, I don't want to interact with him. And they're all running around, and no one would say a word to me. I'd paint outside for 2 hours straight, and I might have like one person talk to me. And if I'm in Camden or Rockport Harbor, I've got nonstop dialogue with people. So I've gotten to the point where that first half hour when I'm trying to block things in, like when I'm really like trying to make my strategic decisions that are going to set the tone for the whole experience of the painting, I want to have some time to think then. And after that, if someone wants to interrupt me now and then, generally, usually it's a 2 to 3 minute conversation. It's really quick. I smile, how are you? It's nice to meet you. Where are you from? You know, they know someone who's a painter. They want to tell me about. That's fine. And then usually we're all set. But sometimes I've had people like, do you mind if I watch? No, that's fine. And they stand shoulder to shoulder with me, like they bump into my shoulder and just start. It's like, well, you can't actually lean into me to watch. You can stand back a little bit. We can talk, but there some people who don't quite get it. But the vast majority of people, one of the best things, I did not realize this when I was starting, but it's been great for my career that I paint outside. I stand outside. And just, when people come up, as long as I'm not having a really bad day painting, I'm able to turn around and smile, introduce myself, and have some kind of interaction with people. So I've gotten to know a lot of people who've been interested in my art through standing outside and painting. And it's been wonderful. It's great as a painter to know the people who are interested in your work and to have any dialogue with the people who are looking at paintings. And the other thing that I think is really great that I had no idea was going to happen was there are a lot of people who are intimidated by art, who are they've always thought it was this sort of this ivory tower that they don't get it, they're never going to get it, it doesn't make any sense to them, and they come up to see what I'm doing because their kids are curious half the time, or they just want to see what I'm doing, and I get to be sort of an ambassador for the art world. I get to be kind of like, as long as I'm not in a bad mood, if I can smile and be friendly, it takes some of the fear of art away, having someone who's painting in public and is willing to share their experience with you. So, there's definitely benefits to doing it, even though it is hard to have to step back every once in a while and talk to somebody.
Do you ever get any hecklers?
Well, I have friends who are hecklers. Like I said, I've been in Camden for 9 years, or almost 10 years, and they're like the harbor master in Rockport, it's not the current one, but the previous one, would drive by and yell. I'd be standing on the side of the street, I'd kick my flip-flops off, and I'd just be standing there painting somewhere, and he'd yell at me, "Hey, you dirty hippie, go back home, go put some shoes on," and honking his horn, screaming, and nobody knows that I know him. The people who are visiting have no idea that I actually know this guy, and he's not just some crazy guy in a pickup truck screaming at me. But once in a while, once in a while, a teenager will drive by if I'm on the side of a road, and someone I don't know and just scream, and that can really startle you. You could hear a car coming and be prepared for that, but when all of a sudden someone's yelling as they go flying by you, once in a while I sort of jump back. But it's not that bad usually. I did have, I teach painting also, so I teach either 2-day workshops or I just had a 5-day workshop last week, and we were painting in Rockport Harbor and right in this sort of public park area. And one of my students was painting a fishing boat, and apparently some fisherman walked by her. I was not there for this, but a fisherman walked by her and started correcting her drawing on her boat. And she asked, "Do you paint?" She's like, "Nah, I don't paint. My sister does. I know all about painting. This is what you're doing wrong." And so there's always, you know, the possibility of something like that. But that's not that bad. Yeah. Even if someone comes by and says, you know, they're not impressed, or that's, "Oh, did you mean to paint it that dark?" Or are you gonna? You know, friends will say. That one friend will walk up and ask what I'm working on. Like, "Oh, what do you paint?" It's like, "Oh, I really like the light on this boat," and I'll be like finished with the painting, and someone will say, "Oh, you're gonna put that in when you get home?" Like, you know, there's always people looking for fun ways to tease you. But yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you like Wyatt a lot. Who else do you look at?
One of my favorites is Peter Poskis. He's a Connecticut painter who paints on Mohegan also. He does very realistic, very tight realistic paintings, but they're full of color. They're just absolutely beautiful color in them. And then I really like Connie Hayes' paintings. They're a lot looser than mine, they're the opposite end. But again, her color, Peter Poskis' colors are very specific and realistic, but they're very rich and just, the paintings definitely have a warm glow to them. Connie Hayes' paintings are definitely much more like a abstracted sense of color within a realistic landscape, but it's absolutely beautiful and really nice brushwork, and just the painterly stuff she does I really like. Tolaf Rundquist is another one of my favorites. Bjorn Rundquist is his dad, who is down Port Clyde every summer, and Tolaf's a young guy. He's probably in his mid to late 20s, but he's doing really nice stuff. Actually, another Jessica Stahman. These are mostly local people, but she's got a few paintings in here and a few on the stairs here. She and I went to college together. I think her work's really nice. There's a big one in this room in the corner over here that I think is a really nice painting. Just a lot of interesting clear reflections and colors. And as far as like bigger folks, like Rembrandt's always been pretty much top dog for me. I absolutely love Rembrandt's paintings. You know, Monet, I like de Kooning. I think that the sort of common thread I've realized over the years is more to do with people who handle the paint really well. Like when there's a word that my parents I think still think I made up, which is painterly painting. And painterly painting to me is sort of showing through your painting that you love your materials. Like showing by the way you put the paint down that you love the paint. And I think whether it's an abstract painter or a very realistic painter or somewhere in the middle, or even some conceptual, wild idea painter, if they're making images with their material to show they really love what they're doing, that's what really makes me want to see more of it.
I was going to say, Colin, did you say something about where your color theory comes from? You're sort of a particular palette, like in contrast to Connie Hayes or
Right.
Phil Fry.
Yeah, well, I think they have more specific sort of ideas about what they're doing and playing around. Like I think they'll pick a palette to sort of work within, or like try and exaggerate a sense of color temperature and a color idea. I'm generally basing the colors I choose off of what I'm seeing. Like I'm not trying to be exact about. I want to be fairly accurate to what I see, but as long as it creates a context that I feel like describes the reality of the scene, that's fine with me. Like with the greens in that birch trees, there's a lot of, I'm trying to see which greens have a little bit more brown in them, or a little more orange, or just straight lime yellow, just lime bright greens. But I'm trying to really, like what I think is fun about painting is trying to recreate the color feeling that day in a fairly accurate way. So generally, I'm like, I don't really, in terms of sort of I have a fairly limited palette of 2 blues, 2 yellows, and 2 reds, and white, and that's basically what I paint with. Sometimes I throw a couple other colors on, like a brown, or they're basically cheater colors that I could mix out of those, but you know, I really just use a limited palette and try and get as much information as I can out of that palette. But I don't really have like a specific, I know some people come at it with like a I don't know, color idea, or Lyndon Frederick definitely has color ideas he works with, and he does stunning paintings with that. But I just want to have the most, I want to put the palette that I know in front of me and a canvas and try and have the most honest reaction I can to the scenes in front of me. Is there anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Have you ever seen any Jill Boys paintings?
Not, a couple of years ago I think I did.
Wild colors, and I talked to her one time, I said, where do you get those colors? She says, that's what I see.
Yeah.
And they are just, but when she looks out at things, she sees colors that you and I
I've lived too clean of a life to see those colors. I was too tame as a younger man. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.